Terry Pratchett, one of my favorite authors and arguably the best writer of humorous fantasy and science fiction, once said that he didn't think Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was the funniest science fiction novel ever written. That distinction, he said, went to Bill the Galactic Hero by Harry Harrison. All right, I want to have a talk about this. Hey everybody, welcome to D3 Reads. I'm Eric, and thanks so much for joining today. We're going to continue talking science fiction books as we kind of wrap up the summer, because we got a couple of big things that we're working on. I've said a couple of times over the last couple of videos that Jeff, my co-host of D3R, and I are going to we're putting together a video of what we think of are some of the best humorous fantasy and science fiction novels out there. Matter of fact, I started researching this topic last year. What I did was I went to a couple social media platforms, Blue Sky, Threads, and some others, I think. I asked the question, what authors would people recommend who are similar in style to Douglas Adams or Terry Pratchett? And I got a few recommendations, and I've since read some of these recommendations. I want to include them in that video I'm talking about that we've been working on. But one of the things that caught my attention was when someone recommended to me Harry Harrison's Bill the Galactic Hero. The thing that caught my attention was the quote that I shared with you at the beginning of this video, that Pratchett thought that Harry Harrison's Bill the Galactic Hero was a more funny sci-fi novel than Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I thought was a pretty bold thing to say. So I tried finding that quote to no avail. I tried to find the source of that quote, rather, to no avail. But recently, as I was kind of putting this video together, I finally found it. It was actually pretty easy this time looking around for it, and I'll include a link to it here. Now, as I understand it, Terry Pratchett, while not close friends with Douglas Adams, was a fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and may have even been inspired and nodded to him throughout their writing careers. And so I don't think this was an insult at all. So this recommendation or this claim carries a lot of weight with me, so I wanted to read it. So I ordered this book, I think through Thrift Books, and that was about the time that I realized, and I mentioned this in a previous video, that this is the book that Jeff loaned to me back in the 1980s, and I set it aside, lost it, and never read it. And so I could have read this a long time ago and had a better appreciation for this book. But what we're going to do is we're going to dive into Bill the Galactic Hero and compare it to Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and see if we can see where Terry Pratchett's coming from when he says that it's better than, that Bill the Galactic Hero is better than The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So we're going to start off actually high level. There are just some similarities, very high level similarities. Obviously, they're both science fiction, and they both rely on absurd plots. These stories aren't just characters in science fiction-y, semi-plausible kind of stories. The authors of these two books, Adams and Harrison, rather than just having a string of wisecracking characters, they use satire and they use humor to highlight various absurdities about the world that we live in the here and now. And they do that very, very well. But the plots are vastly different, as one might imagine, and we're going to jump into that right now. We're going to start, I think, with, the more well-known book, which is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now, this comparison we're going to restrict just to the first book, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was published in 1979. And we're going to do that because I believe that in the context of the quote that Pratchett was talking about, he was talking specifically about Hitchhiker's Guide versus Bill the Galactic Hero. Not either, both of them have, of course, sequels. And he didn't seem to be referring to either of them. So our main characters in this story are Arthur Dent, who's the human protagonist, and his friend Ford Prefect, who's an alien who's disguised as a human on Earth to write articles for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is this vast tome of knowledge. And what happens is the Earth gets marked for destruction for this hyper expressway going through space through this neck of the woods, and actually gets more complicated than that, as we learn in other books. But again, we're kind of sticking to this one right now. So Earth gets destroyed, but luckily, because Ford Prefect is an experienced hitchhiker, he grabs his buddy Arthur and hitchhikes and catches a ride on the spaceship that announced the destruction of the Earth that's being piloted by the I don't know if you would call them evil so much as disgruntled Vogons, and there Arthur Dent's adventure begins. And from there he runs into the quirky Zaphod Beeblebrox, who is a distant kind of cousin, I guess, of Ford Prefect. And it's just, the whole story is just, it's absurd, but it's hilarious. You see a lot of the kind of social anxieties of Englishmen come out a lot in this. It cracks me up going through this book, just how awkward Arthur Dent is. You know, Arthur is like the perfect kind of straight man for this. He's instantly in over his head. He has no idea what's going on. He barely understands anything, if at all. And he's got this brain of this kind of cynical Englishman, again from the 1970s, and trying to make sense of everything. You know, I love this. I love the science fiction in this. Their spaceship is something called the Heart of Gold, and it's powered by something called an improbability drive, and it's able to transport itself anywhere, I think, in the universe. But part of the side effect of that is it creates these impossible coincidences, and that drives some of the absurd situations that Arthur Dent finds himself throughout this book and some of the subsequent books as well. So again, just a lot of really just intelligent, hilarious humor and jokes coming in. Some of them subtle, some of them not so subtle. The characters in the story are just so much fun. Besides Arthur and Ford, you've got, of course, Zaphod Beeblebrox, who's the president of the galaxy somehow. And you've got Marvin, the paranoid android. Marvin quite a bit. I may be looking at it through rose-colored glasses because I grew up reading these books. I've read, actually, I didn't realize, but there was the last book in the series I never actually got around to reading. This collection that I've owned for years ends at So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, and I've read up through that. But there's one more book to this series that Douglas Adams wrote before he died. And then another author picked up and finished off, I guess, the story after that. I haven't read those, but Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is it stands the test of time. You don't feel like it's kind of aged out too bad. The parts that are kind of dated, because again, written in the late 70s and early 80s, you can easily forgive. But the overall plot and the overall satire of the book, I mean, who doesn't know about 42 and the answer to life, the universe, and everything, right? I think the imprints that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has made on popular culture is huge. Now, having said that, Pratchett's point when he was talking in that video about Harry Harrison's work being better, he was making the point that when Harrison published Bill the Galactic Hero back in 1965, that the way hadn't been prepared really for a book like that. That when Adams did his, he was writing on, you know, he just a couple years before, you had Star Wars had just come out. Star Trek had been building up fans for over a decade before. And so Isaac Asimov's work was widely published and disseminated. You had Dune out there. So you had all this massive science fiction works that have become hugely popular over the course of the 70s after Bill the Galactic Hero came out. And so by the time Adams published his work, there was a much larger audience waiting to appreciate it. Go back to 1965 when Bill came out. His argument was the ground wasn't quite as fertile for it, and that's why Bill the Galactic Hero, it wasn't as big of a success and isn't as well known as Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So, again, having read that quote and having heard from that quote, I went out and I bought Bill the Galactic Hero. I read it, and I tell you, I enjoyed it thoroughly. I really, really did. It is a preposterous story, but it definitely delivers some biting satire. In Bill the Galactic Hero, Bill is just this simple guy who wants to live his life on his planet, which is some far-flung kind of backwaters planet, farming kind of planet. He wants to be a technical fertilizer operator. That's his dream. He just wants to live a simple life being this fertilizer operator, but he gets conned / forced, tricked into joining the military. Next thing he knows, he finds himself at basic training, trying to survive so he could be sent off to fight this group of aliens called the Chingers. Now, the Chingers have been demonized by the imperial government, which is the overarching government of humanity across the galaxy. And they've been told that these Chingers are 6-foot-tall lizard men who just want to destroy everything we hold dear. And so even though Bill did not want to join the military, you got to sympathize with him because he's a good guy. And even though he didn't want to join, once he was in, he tried his best to be a good soldier. A star trooper, I forget what they call him. But he continues to find himself just in these situations that there doesn't seem to be a way for him to win or get ahead. The military structure above him seems to care very little about him. The fact that there's massive casualties in this war seems to be of a secondary concern. So Bill is just trying to make do in a bad situation, to do his duty as best he can, but he finds that even the things that he holds highly, he idealizes, like there's a lot of patriotism that's been ginned up by the Empire. He finds a lot of that's really not held by the elite in society. So the satire is pretty biting in this. Now, I found that the story was kind of clunky. You know, you start off with Bill in basic, and then you go to his first assignment in space where he first tastes combat. He tastes combat for the first time, and then he goes to the Imperial capital to be decorated because of things that he did in that battle. And then he winds up off in this far-flung planet in this kind of entrenched swamp battle. And it's almost like a series of short stories that got kind of linked together. But there are legitimate laugh-out-loud moments. I thought the book started just a little bit slowly, I guess because I was expecting it to be chuckling right away like it was with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But when it caught fire, it finally caught fire, and you kind of appreciated the direction that he was going with this, the author's going with this. Now, I think any fan of science fiction is going to like Bill the Galactic Hero. But as I read it, I couldn't help but notice that some of the satire aimed at the military institution and the political institutions felt kind of personal for some reason. And I looked it up, and sure enough, Harry Harrison was in the military. He was drafted in World War II, served from 1943 for a few years in the Army Air Corps, and it wasn't really a great experience for him. He served as an MP for some time, and he did some other things as well. He was doing some aviation work as a technician of some kind. Some of the satire against the military, you could tell it comes from a very personal place from. So if you're a veteran, particularly in the Army or in some ground-oriented expertise or aviation, you might appreciate some of the satire a little bit more. Where it's coming from, because you're kind of like, because as I read it, I thought that sounds like this is very personal. Overall, I thought that this book was very good. It was very, very funny. I don't know if I'm quite on board with the statement that Terry Pratchett made that this was better than Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I think that setting aside even my affection for Adams's works, I think Hitchhiker's flows much better than Bill the Galactic Hero. And the characters in Hitchhikers, as odd as they are, I think are somehow a little bit more relatable, except in the case of maybe Bill. I think Bill's a very relatable character. The others maybe not so much in the story. So I really enjoyed it, but in my opinion, Hitchhiker's Guide is still the superior book. Out of the two, I think it is a much funnier science fiction novel than Bill the Galactic Hero. But I'd love to hear what you all think. Those of you who have read both books, let me know. If you haven't read Bill the Galactic Hero, because I'm assuming most folks have read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, get a copy of it, read it. Let me know what you think. And if you have read both of them, let me know which one that you think is the better science fiction humor book. Thanks so much, guys, for joining. If you haven't liked and subscribed, I'd love for you to do so. I appreciate all the comments, all the discussion that we have over these. They're always a lot of fun. So please drop a comment in and let us know what you think. Thanks so much for your time. Have a great day.